Hi guys, you should have your module 6 opened up. Turn to page 23 and I'm going to put the warm-up up here, and I'm going to ask the teacher to press pause so you can copy the warm-up, do the problems for a few minutes. You can work together on it. You're not using a calculator, so go ahead and copy these first 4 problems. Press pause now. Okay, you should have these 4 problems done. If they're not everybody's done, let's go ahead and press pause again and wait for everybody to finish. So now everybody should be done at this point. So let's see if you guys got the right answers. 56 falls between which 2 perfect squares, and I hope you recognize that it became between the square root of 64 and the square root of 49, so it's between 7 and 8. The square root of 20 is between the square root of 16 and the square root of 25, so the 2 integers it falls between is 4 and 5. 150, you might not know what it falls between, but you know that 144 is awfully close, so the answers are 12 and 13. The number 4 is a little bit tricky. It looks like 81, which you know the square root of 81 is 9. Well, the square root of 0.81 is actually 0.9, because if I multiply 0.9 times 0.9, I get 0.81. So it actually falls between 0 and 1. Wonder if anybody got that right. So ask the substitute to press pause after I put the next 4 problems up on the screen here. I want you guys to copy these down and do these 1, 2, 3, 4 problems. You can work on this for a couple minutes. And then when you're ready, we'll go ahead and press play and come back and finish these. Okay, you should be finished. Hopefully you recognize this is awfully close to 16. So the answer that I would think would be best for this would be the square root of 16 minus a tiny little bit more. So maybe 3.9 or 3.8 even. But I think that's closest. 10 is awfully close to 9. So hopefully you recognize that it's slightly more than the square root of 9. So 3.1, maybe 3.2. This means 2 times whatever this is. Well, the square root of 5 is a little bit more than the square root of 4. So if I think of it as maybe like 2.1, if you multiply 2 times 2.1, you get 4.2. Now maybe if you put 2.2 here, you would have gotten 4.4. So somewhere in the ballpark there. And lastly, number 8, you're subtracting whatever this square root is. So the square root of 35 is awfully close to the square root of 36, just slightly less. So the square root of 36 is 6, so I'm going to guess this is probably 5.9. So when you subtract that out, you should get 0.1 approximately. Okay, press pause one more time while you guys then turn to page 24. Page 24. I know this is page 23, but I want to highlight the word simplifying square roots. So what I would like to do is show you how to simplify a square root without a calculator, but I'd like to actually have you guys have calculators. So once again, if you don't already have them, press pause and distribute calculators to everybody. Quick calculator lesson. Right there you see a blue square root sign, and anytime you need to use one of these blue things, you have to press the second key first. So right now I want to know what the square root, so you press the blue key and then the key here next to the 7, of 40 is, just because it's sitting right here. Well, you guys know that it should be between 36 and 49, so it should be like between 6 and 7, and then you don't have to actually close the parenthesis unless you want to. And 6.3 is the answer, 6.3, by an irrational number, of course. So now let me show you another thing here. To check your answer, see how that has an x squared key? If I just press answer squared, it should come back to what we started with. So if I said 2.1 squared, it will give me what that is. And then if I want to find the square root of 2.1, which I know is, the square root of this, I can take the square root of 4.41, and it's back to where we started. Okay, so now on page 24, stand by. Now we're not going to use a calculator. We're going to use a method called simplifying square roots. So what I'd like you to do is think of the factors of 32 for me. What multiplies to 32? And just list them in pairs. And I know 1 and 32 are factors, but those aren't going to help us because that's the same as 32. So does 2 go in there? Yes. 2 and 16, not 3, and then maybe 4 and 8. I think those are all the factors of 32. Well, what are you looking for in this section is you're looking for factors that are perfect squares. So see how this pair of factors, 2 and 16, has a perfect square at 16? And this pair also has a perfect square of 4? Well, right there, this is the greatest perfect square. And that's important for this lesson. So now all you have to do, it's very simple, is you take this 32 and you split it into these two factors, 16 times 2, because that equals 32. Now watch how easy this is. Which one of these two factors is a perfect square? Well, obviously 16. What's the square root of 16? You take out the square root of 16 and you put it on the outside of the square root sign. And remember, this is called a radical. So the square root of 16 is 4, and the square root of 2 is, well, it's irrational. We don't know it. So if it's not a perfect square, you just leave it there. That's the answer. And the way you would read it is 4 radical 2. Now what I want you to do is check our answer with a calculator. Let's take the square root of 32 and get a decimal. Take the square root of 32, and you get that decimal. Everybody should be pushing buttons to make sure you do it. Now what I want you to do is I want you to actually take the square root of 2 and multiply it by 4. So here's how you do that. You take 4 times the square root of 2. And you don't actually need that parenthesis. So let me try it again. 4 times the square root of 2 is exactly what that says right there. And when you press enter, that decimal should look equivalent. So the square root of 32 in a simplified form is 4 radical 2. That's how you read this. So what did we actually do? So find an empty spot somewhere, maybe on the previous page, down here, 23, or on the back, and let's write the steps to simplify radicals. And again, pause at any time if you need to. Simplify radicals. First, what did I have you do here? Now, those don't count. I tried to list the factors of 32. So, find perfect square factors and write as a product under the radical. Find perfect square factors and write as a product under the radical. That's what I did right here, the 16 and the 2 under the radical. Then what did I do? And I use the word take out because anytime you have a perfect square under a perfect square under a radical means, hey, you got the square root of it. What's the square root of 16? It's 4. Then take out, and that word out just means it's going to come out of the radical, the square root of the perfect square, leave the rest, leave the other factor under the radical. That's it. Press pause if you need to copy this down, please. Okay, back to page 24 here. Now, what if I wouldn't have used this perfect square factor of 16? What if I would have used 4 and 8? Let's do this problem one more time. Except this time, let's use 4 times 8. Well, that is a perfect square, and it does have a square root. Take out the square root of 4, which is 2. So what if I would have written 2 radical 8? Now, those don't even look anywhere near identical to each other. But if I try the 2 radical 8, 2 square root 8, it comes back to that same decimal. So what's wrong? Well, what's wrong is it's not fully simplified because 8 still has factors that are perfect squares. 8 is really 4 times 2. Well, this just means take the square root of this guy out. What is the square root of this 4? Take out the square root of this 4 and bring it out here. 2. Multiply it by what was already out here, which was the other 2, and leave the rest. And as you can see, 2 times 2 radical this gets us the same result. So you can do it in 2 steps if you need to, you just aren't finished. Kind of like if you don't simplify a fraction all the way. So this video is going to end at 15 minutes. I'm not going to be finished with all the classwork at this time in the 15 minutes. So when we run out of time, there should be a second video for you. So right now, go ahead and think of the factors of 45. And, well, you could come up with 3 times 15 with your calculator. You can just start dividing. But many of you might have recognized that it's 9 times 5. Now, why don't I care about those? Well, why don't they help me? You're looking for factors that are perfect squares. And 9 and 5 are perfect squares. So write it as 9 times 5. What do you do with this once you write it as perfect square factors? You take out the square root of the perfect square and leave the other factor under the radical. Take out the square root of this, which is 3, leave the rest. So the answer is 3 radical 5. And test it. What is the square root of 45? Well, we knew it was 6 point something. Well, let's see if that's the same, and then you do it. 3 times radical 5 should be the same number, and it is. Continuing for another 2 minutes here. Most of these guys are going to be pretty simple. I'm going to do knock these 2 out in 2 seconds. The square root of a fraction looks scary, but it's easy. Isn't 1 a perfect square and 4 a perfect square? So clearly the square root of 1 and 4, if I take the square root of the top and the bottom, is just a half, because a half times a half is a fourth. This should take you 2 seconds. What's the square root of that? What's the square root of that? Write it as a fraction. Square root of 49 is 7. Square root of 36 is 6. You're done. No stress. Big numbers for number 5. 1800. That sounds like 1800, does it not? Hey, I love that. That's a perfect square. See if you can come up with any other factors besides 18 and 100. Maybe, 18 is divisible by 9. Oh, I wonder if it's divisible, 9 times what? 200, I think? That's a bigger perfect square than that. Well, what if I went 900 times 2? Well, 900 is actually a perfect square. 900 is this product of 30 times 30. Use this magic thing to find that out. So guys, out of all these lists of perfect factors, even though this is a perfect square, this one's a perfect square, this one's a perfect square, this is the one that has the greatest perfect square. So, square root of 900 times 2. The square root of 900 comes out, which is 30. 30 radical 2 is the simplified answer. Okay, we got time for one more, so press pause for a minute while you guys find factors of 135. Hint, there's a 5. Press pause and do this problem. These are the factors that I found pretty quickly, and actually I could have divided by 3 as well, but I think this is good. And you should know why, because this guy is a perfect square. So if I write it as 9 times 15, square root of 9. This guy comes out, you take the square root out, leave what's left, so 3 radical 15. Now just double check, does 15 have any factors that are perfect squares? Well, 15 only has 3 and 5 and itself and 1, so you're done. Okay, pick up the next video to finish the lesson, please.